need you to put your hands where I can see them.
I'm standing in my own yard. What's the problem, officer?
We're looking for a suspect matching your description. I'm giving you a lawful command.
Matching my description? I'm out here in a bonnet and a t-shirt watering the lawn.
American female, medium build. That's enough.
That's not a description. That's a category.
Suspicious.
And it doesn't justify stopping me on my own property.
You're being uncooperative. You need to follow instructions.
I don't have to follow unlawful instructions. Identify yourself and tell me what probable cause you have to detain you.
The handcuffs clicked shut. Officer Marcus Webb didn't know he just ended his career. The woman standing in front of him, wearing a dark red head wrap and casual clothes outside her house, wasn't moving or fighting. She just stood there calm, like someone who knows the other person just made a huge mistake. The camera on Webb's uniform was recording everything. Every word, every move, every second of what would become the most expensive arrest the department ever made. Officer Webb had been a cop for 9 years. He wasn't new, but he wasn't known for being patient either. That morning, the police radio said they were looking for a woman who stole credit cards. The description was really basic, too basic. Black woman, medium size. That was it. Nothing about how tall she was, how old, what she was wearing, or anything else. Just two things that could match thousands of women in the city. Webb drove around the neighborhood looking at every black woman he saw. He passed 3 women walking their dogs. He slowed down near a woman getting her mail. He watched a woman putting groceries in her car. None of them were doing anything wrong, but Webb was checking every face like he was looking through photos, wanting to find someone, anyone, who might match that weak description. Then he saw Jasmine Carter. Jasmine was standing in her front yard wearing comfortable clothes. She had on a dark red bonnet covering her hair and a pink striped shirt. She was holding a water hose, watering the small bushes near her front door. The water sparkled in the afternoon sun. It was her day off. She had worked late the night before on secret government reports and was having a quiet afternoon at home. The most exciting thing she planned was maybe ordering food for dinner. She had no idea what was about to happen. Webb pulled his police car to the side of the road and got out. He didn't call for help from other officers. He didn't check the address. He didn't call the radio dispatcher to ask if there were any specific places connected to the suspect. He just saw a black woman and decided this must be the person he was looking for. Jasmine noticed the officer walking toward her and turned off the water. The hose dripped onto the sidewalk. She wasn't worried. She thought maybe there was a problem in the neighborhood or the officer needed directions. Maybe someone reported a suspicious car or a small accident nearby. She was wrong. The moment Webb started giving orders, Jasmine knew something was wrong. The officer's voice was aggressive right from the start. There was no polite, hello, or excuse me ma'am, or sorry to bother you. Just demands. Jasmine stayed calm. Her training at the Defense Intelligence Agency taught her how to handle stressful situations. She had been in rooms with dangerous foreign spies. She had looked at terrorist messages. She had given reports to generals and politicians. One angry police officer wasn't going to make her panic. She kept her arms crossed and asked simple questions. What's the problem? Why are you stopping me? What description are you looking for? These were fair questions, the kind any person has the right to ask when police confront them on their own property. Webb didn't like the questions. In his mind, people who ask questions are hiding something. Innocent people just do what they're told. He saw Jasmine's calm as attitude. He saw the questions as her fighting back. The more Jasmine asked, the more Webb became sure he had found his suspect. It was bad thinking. Asking questions meant she was guilty, and being guilty meant she deserved the questions, and round it went. But Jasmine wasn't a suspect. She was a federal agent with top-level security clearance who spent her days looking at threats to the country. She had access to information that most people could never see. She had been checked, investigated, and cleared at levels most people don't even know exist. She knew the law better than most police officers. She knew her rights, and she knew within the first 30 seconds of this meeting that this officer was breaking them. Type, "No way," in the comments if you think this officer was already wrong at this point. Jasmine tried to calm things down. She explained that she was a federal agent. She offered to show her ID. She suggested the officer call his boss. She even said she would stay right where she was while Webb checked who she was. Webb refused everything. In his mind, if Jasmine was really a federal agent, she would have said so right away. The fact that Jasmine asked questions first meant she was lying. At least that's what Webb told himself. The truth was simpler and uglier. Webb had already decided who Jasmine was the second he saw her. The description said black woman, and Jasmine was a black woman. And in Webb's mind, that was enough. Everything Jasmine said after that was just noise. Just a criminal trying to talk her way out of trouble. Webb thought he had seen it 100 times before. The argument lasted about 4 minutes. Nobody was screaming, but the tension was thick. Jasmine stayed composed, but her voice had an edge to it. She wasn't afraid. She was angry. Angry that she had to explain herself in her own yard. Angry that being a federal officer meant nothing to this person. Angry that no matter what she said, this officer had already made up his mind. Angry that she was being treated like a criminal while watering plants in a bonnet and house clothes. Then Webb made his decision. He was going to arrest Jasmine. Not because Jasmine had done a crime. Not because there was proof of anything wrong, but because Jasmine had questioned him and Webb couldn't let that go. In Webb's mind, this was about respect, about control, about making sure people knew who was in charge. The body camera captured everything. Jasmine slowly turned around. Her hands went behind her back. The metal handcuffs were cold against her skin. The clicking sound was really loud in the quiet neighborhood afternoon. Jasmine asked for a supervisor again. Webb said she would talk to one at the police station. Jasmine stood there with handcuffs on in her own front yard wearing a bonnet and a t-shirt while her neighbors started coming out to watch. An older man from across the street called out asking if everything was okay. Webb told him to step back. A woman 2 houses down started recording on her phone. Webb didn't stop her, but he didn't look happy about it either. A teenager on a bicycle stopped on the sidewalk watching with big eyes. Jasmine said nothing. She just stood there letting it happen because she knew that fighting back would only make things worse. She knew what happened to black people who fought against wrong arrests. She wasn't going to become another name in the news. Webb walked Jasmine to the police car and put her in the back seat. The whole time Jasmine was quiet. She had said everything she needed to say. Now she would let the system do the talking. The back seat smelled like cleaning products and sweat. The plastic seat was hard and uncomfortable. Jasmine sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead, her mind already thinking about what would happen next. The drive to the station took 12 minutes. Webb didn't say anything. Jasmine didn't either. The police radio made crackling sounds sometimes with other calls. Other officers responding to other situations. The world kept going like nothing unusual had happened. When they got there, Webb walked Jasmine inside like he had just caught a major criminal. He stood tall and confident. He really believed he had done good police work. Other officers looked over but didn't think much of it. Just another arrest on another afternoon. Another person to process. Another face to book. The station was busy with the usual afternoon activity. People making bail. Lawyers meeting clients. Officers writing reports. Nobody paid special attention to the woman in the bonnet being walked to the processing area. Jasmine was processed like any other person being booked. Fingerprints rolled on the digital scanner. Photo taken against the height chart. Personal things removed and written down. Her phone. Her house keys on a chain with a small silver charm her mother had given her. Her wallet with $73 cash and 4 credit cards. And then the items that mattered. When they took her belongings, they found her credentials. Her federal ID badge with her photo and security clearance level. Her DIA access card with the computer chip that opened doors at secure buildings. Her permit to carry a service weapon, though she wasn't carrying the gun because she was watering her lawn on a peaceful afternoon. The officer doing the processing looked at the credentials, then looked at Jasmine, then looked at Webb. His name was Kevin Lang and he had been doing this job for 15 years. He had processed thousands of people. He had seen every kind of fake ID, fake badge, and fake credential that criminals could make. He knew what real federal credentials looked like. These were real. "Did you see these?" he asked, holding up the DIA badge. Webb looked at them quickly. "She mentioned something about being a federal agent. I think they're fake." Lang studied the badge more closely. The special shiny parts, the tiny printing, the weight and feel of the card. Nothing about these looked fake. He turned to his computer and pulled up a guide for federal credentials. Everything matched. He looked at Webb again. Webb was still standing there with his arms crossed, still sure he had done the right thing. Lang excused himself and walked directly to his supervisor's office. 5 minutes later, Captain Robert Mills came down to the processing area. He was a 30-year police veteran who had seen almost everything, but the look on Lang's face told him this was something new. Mills looked at the credentials spread out on the desk. He picked up the DIA badge and looked at it closely. He looked at Jasmine, sitting calmly in the holding area, hands now uncuffed, sitting up straight, face showing nothing. He looked at Webb, standing there with his arms crossed, still thinking he had done the right thing. Mills felt his stomach drop. He had been a captain long enough to know a career-ending disaster when he saw one. "Come with me," Mills said to Webb. It wasn't a request. Do you think the captain already knew this was about to be a disaster? Drop a comment below. In his office, Mills closed the door. He sat behind his desk and pointed for Webb to sit. Webb did, still confident, still sure of himself. Mills asked him to explain from the beginning why he arrested this woman. Webb went through his thinking like he was reading from a training book. He got a call about a suspect. He saw someone matching the description. The woman wouldn't cooperate and refused to follow his lawful orders. She said she was a federal agent but wouldn't show ID right away. Webb felt he had no choice but to arrest her for blocking an investigation. Mills listened to the whole thing without stopping him. His face showed nothing. When Webb finished, Mills leaned back in his chair and asked one question. "Did you ever ask for her name so you could check it in the system?" Webb paused. The confidence went away for a second. He hadn't. He had thought the woman was lying and didn't bother to check. He had been so sure, so convinced by his own thinking that he never did the basic police work that might have stopped this whole situation. Mills picked up his phone and called the DIA field office. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. Mills said who he was, explained that they had stopped someone claiming to be a DIA officer, and gave Jasmine's name. The voice on the other end went quiet for a moment, then asked if this was some kind of joke. Mills said it wasn't. The voice asked where Jasmine was right now. Mills said she was in the station. The voice, now louder, wanted to know why a DIA officer was in a police station. Mills explained about the arrest. The response was immediate and angry. The person on the other end demanded Jasmine be let go immediately, that any charges be dropped, and that the boss would be calling the police chief within the hour. When Mills hung up, his face had gone pale. His hands were shaking a little. He told Webb to wait in his office and not to talk to anyone. Then he went back down to where Jasmine was being held. Jasmine was sitting in a plastic chair in the holding area. She was sitting up perfectly straight, hands folded in her lap, staring ahead like she was waiting for a bus, not sitting in a police station after being wrongly arrested. Mills walked up carefully. He introduced himself and said he was sorry. The words sounded empty even as he said them. He said there had been a terrible mistake and she was free to go right away. He offered to have someone drive her home. Jasmine said no. Her voice was calm but cold. She said she would call someone to pick her up, and she wanted copies of every single piece of paperwork about her arrest, including the full body camera video, the arrest report, the booking report, and any notes or messages about what happened. She wanted everything in writing. Mills agreed to everything. He didn't argue. He didn't make excuses. He didn't try to make it sound less bad. He knew exactly how bad this was. He had been in law enforcement long enough to know that when you wrongly arrest a federal agent, your department is about to have a very bad year. Within an hour, Jasmine was out of the station. She called her supervisor at DIA and explained what happened. She kept her voice steady and professional, just stating facts. Her supervisor was silent for a long moment, then said he would handle it. He told her to take the rest of the week off and write down everything she remembered while it was fresh. Write down every detail, every word said, every action taken, times if she could remember them. By the end of that day, 3 phone calls had been made. 1 from the DIA to the police chief. 1 from the police chief to the mayor. 1 from the mayor to the city lawyer. Every single person who heard the story had the same reaction. This was going to be a nightmare. This was going to cost the city a lot of money. This was going to be in the news. This was going to be used as an example of what not to do for the next 20 years. The next morning, Officer Marcus Webb was put on leave while they investigated. He was told to hand in his badge and gun and not to talk about the case with anyone. He was told to go home and wait. He left the building in shock, still believing he had done nothing wrong. In his mind, he was being punished for doing his job. He was being blamed for political reasons. The investigation took 6 weeks. Internal Affairs talked to Webb multiple times. They watched the body camera footage over and over. They pulled radio records and looked at the original call. They talked to neighbors who saw the arrest. They talked to the city lawyer about potential lawsuits. They brought in an outside expert who specialized in civil rights cases to look at everything. Every single finding pointed to the same thing. Webb had no good reason to stop Jasmine, no good reason to hold her, no good reason to arrest her. The description he was working from was too vague to justify any of it. Jasmine had not done any crime. She had not blocked anything. She had simply asked questions, which is not illegal. She had stood up for her rights, which is not illegal. She had asked for a supervisor, which is not illegal. The investigation also found that Webb had a pattern. Over the previous 2 years, he had stopped and questioned black people at a much higher rate than other officers with similar jobs. Most of those stops led nowhere. Several had resulted in complaints. All of those complaints had been dismissed or marked as no problem. No one had looked at the pattern until now. No one had connected the dots. Webb had been allowed to keep working with his unfair views unchecked. If you think this officer should have been stopped earlier, type facts below. Jasmine, meanwhile, had hired a lawyer. A good one. The kind who specialized in federal civil rights cases and had a history of winning. Not because she needed the money, but because she wanted accountability. She wanted to make sure this didn't happen to someone else who didn't have her resources or knowledge. Her lawyer filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Webb, the police department, and the city. The lawsuit said they did racial profiling, unlawful arrest, violation of civil rights, and emotional harm. The filing was devastating. It included time-stamped breakdowns of the body camera footage. It included statements from neighbors who saw it. It included Jasmine's credentials and work record. It included the pattern of complaints against Webb. It was perfect legal work. The city lawyer looked at the case and gave the mayor simple advice. Settle fast, because if this went to trial, the city would lose and the amount would be much more expensive than any settlement. Plus, the publicity would be terrible. A jury would see the body camera footage of a federal agent being arrested in her own yard for watering plants while black. The verdict would be in the millions. The settlement would be cheaper. 3 months after the arrest, the city offered Jasmine a settlement. The talks took 2 weeks. The amount was never made public, but people familiar with the talk said it was in the high 6 figures, close to $1 million for an arrest that lasted less than 2 hours. Jasmine accepted. Part of the settlement required the police department to do new training on racial bias and unlawful stops. Jasmine personally looked at the training materials before they were approved. She made sure they were real, not just for show. Officer Marcus Webb was fired. The department announced that he had broken multiple policies and had shown a pattern of behavior that didn't match their values. Webb tried to fight being fired, but his union representative told him the case was impossible to win. The body camera footage alone was enough to end his career. The pattern of complaints sealed it. He eventually gave up his appeal. Webb never worked in law enforcement again. He moved to another state and took a job in private security, watching cameras at a shopping mall. He told people he was forced out of the police department for political reasons. He said he was a victim of the system protecting criminals. He never admitted he did anything wrong. He never accepted that his own unfair views and wrong thinking had destroyed his career. Jasmine returned to work at the DIA. Her co-workers knew what happened, but she didn't talk about it much. She had made her point. The system had responded. That was enough for her. She continued her career analyzing intelligence threats and moved up through the ranks over the following years. The arrest became a small note in her work file, only important because of the lawsuit it created. The police department changed some of its rules after this happened. Officers were now required to have specific, clear facts before making a stop, not just vague descriptions. Supervisors started watching body camera footage more regularly to find problem patterns. The training on bias became required every year instead of just during the academy. Radio dispatch procedures were updated to require more detailed suspect descriptions before putting out calls. But the real lesson from that day wasn't about policy or training. It was about assumptions. Officer Webb assumed he knew who Jasmine was the moment he saw her. He saw a black woman and decided that was enough. He never thought that the person standing in that yard might be someone who served her country at the highest levels. He never thought his assumptions might be wrong, and he paid the price for it. Final question: do you think settlements like this actually change police behavior, or do we need stronger consequences? Let me know what you think. Jasmine's arrest lasted less than 2 hours from handcuffs to release, but the effects spread out for years. The city paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. An officer lost his career. A federal agent was embarrassed in her own yard for no reason other than the color of her skin. And it all happened because one person with a badge decided that a vague description and his own unfair views were enough to justify an arrest. The body camera footage from that day was never released to the public because of the settlement agreement. But everyone involved in the case watched it, and everyone who watched it came away with the same thought: this should never have happened. It could have been avoided at every single step. All Webb had to do was ask a few questions, check a name in the system, or call for a supervisor before making assumptions. He did none of those things. The house still stands in that neighborhood. Jasmine lived there for 2 more years before moving to a different work location. The neighbors who watched her get arrested never forgot it. Some of them gave statements during the investigation. They all said the same thing: she was just watering her plants. She wasn't doing anything wrong. They couldn't understand why the officer was so aggressive. Several said they had seen Webb in the neighborhood before, always seeming to focus on certain people more than others. That August afternoon in the bright sunshine with the body camera recording every second, Officer Marcus Webb made a choice. He chose to see a suspect instead of a person. He chose to ignore facts that didn't match his thinking. He chose to arrest instead of investigate, and that choice cost him everything. Jasmine Carter went on with her life. She continued serving her country. She never spoke publicly about the arrest, but everyone who knows the story understands what it means. It's a reminder that a badge doesn't make someone right. That power without responsibility is dangerous, and that sometimes the person you think is a criminal is actually the one protecting you. The arrest lasted 2 hours. The lawsuit took months. The career results were permanent. And the lesson for anyone paying attention was crystal clear. Assumptions are not evidence. Bias is not good reason. And when you put handcuffs on someone based on nothing but the color of their skin and your own unfair thinking, you better be ready for what happens next. Because eventually the truth comes out. The body camera doesn't lie. And justice, even when it takes time, has a way of finding people who abuse their power.